지금 The Professor and the Madman by Simon Winchester. Now we have the English dictionary, right? In the sense that we commonly use the phrase today is a relatively new invention. Okay, so it's talking about the English dictionary. 400 years ago, this is important because it makes a comparison of what we now know. 400 years ago, there was no such convenience available on any English bookshelf. 자, 이 문장이 나오는 이유는 그만큼 예전엔 없었다. It's to exemplify that it's commonly used now. There was none available, for instance, when William Shakespeare was writing his plays. Right? So we got to think why here we have dictionary and then we have William Shakespeare. Whenever he came to use an unusual word or to set a word in what seemed an unusual context, and his plays are extraordinarily rich with examples, he had almost no way of checking the property of what he was about to do. Right? So this example of a William Shakespeare is to show he had nothing to refer to when he was writing with his words. Right? He could not, as the saying goes, look something up. Right? So the word look something up means like, to double check the meaning of, to search in the dictionary. Indeed, the very phrase when it is used in the sense of searching for something in a dictionary or encyclopedia or other book of reference simply did not exist. Right? So he had no way of checking. It does not appear in the English language in the fact until as late as 1692. 이 달자는 여기서 왜 나오는 거예요? 이때까지만 해도 we could not use any kind of reference. When an Oxford historian named Anthony Wood used it, right? The word, you got to think of the word used it here now. All right? What did he use? Search something up, to look for it. Now, one might think that Shakespeare would want to look things up all the time. Am I not consanguineous? Right? He writes in the 12th Night. A few lines on, he talks of thigh doublet of changeable taffeta. He then declares, now is the woodcock near the gin. Shakespeare's vocabulary was evidently prodigious. But how could he be certain in that all these cases where he employed unfamiliar words, he was grammatically and factually right? 그러면 여기서 이런 reference들은 나오는 건 뭐야? It's to show there was no way in that period that he could check whether if he was grammatically correct, right? At the time he was writing, there was atlases, 지도, aplenty. There were prayer books, missals, histories, biographies, romances, books of science and art. Shakespeare is thought to have drawn many of his classical allusions from the specialized thesaurus that had been compiled by a man named Thomas Cooper. Now we have a thesaurus made by Thomas Cooper, but its many errors are replicated far too exactly in the plays for it to be a coincidence. And he is thought also to have drawn from Thomas Wilson's Arte Rhetorica. It is perhaps difficult to imagine so creative a mind working without single work of lexicographical reference beside him, other than Mr. Cooper's crib, which Mrs. Cooper once threw into the fire, prompting the great man to begin all over again. Okay, so this is talking about him starting all over again, right? And Mr. Wilson's little manual, but that was the condition under which his particular genius was compelled to flourish. The English language was spoken and written, but at the time of Shakespeare, it was not defined, not fixed. It was like the air. It was taken for granted, the medium that enveloped and defined all Britons. But as to exactly what it was, what its components were, who knew? 자, 여러분들이, when you're reading something like this, does this have any relation to the previous paragraph? No, it does not, right? Then 여기는 don't have to think so deeply about it. But maybe the info of the thesaurus, right? Thesaurus, because it has relation with the dictionary. Other than that, this story below here has no relation to the mentioning of above. So 여기서 고민하지 마시고 just keep going. Has no relation, right? Now, that is not to say there were no dictionaries at all. So there were dictionaries, right? There had been a collection of Latin words published as Dictionarius as early as 1225, and a little more than a century later, another Latin only as a helpmeet for students of St. Jerome's difficult translation of the scriptures. Scripture is like words from religious Christianity words known as the Vulgate. 1538, the first of the series of Latin English dictionaries appeared in London. Thomas Eliot's alphabetically arranged list. 자, 이런 날짜들, first, 그쵸? First appearing, 이런 것들 다 중요하죠. Which happened to be the first book to employ the English word dictionary in its title. Now, 20 years later, 이거는 왜 중요하죠? 이거의 advancement인 거예요. Okay, a man named Whittles put out a short-day dictionary for younger beginners in both languages, but with words arranged not alphabetically. 자, 이런 건 차이, difference, right? The comparing. This one was not arranged alphabetically, but by subject, categorized, such as the names of brides, brides of the water, brides about the house, cocks, hens, etc., bees, flies, and others, right? The difference. But what was still lacking? Words like this is lacking, right? Because we're looking at the development of the dictionary. The lacking was a proper English dictionary with a full statement of extent of English tongue, with one single exception. What was that exception? Of which Shakespeare probably did not know when he died in 1616. This need remains stubbornly unfulfilled. 이제 this unfulfillment이 무엇인지. Single exception. Others were to remark on the apparent lack as well. In the very same year as Shakespeare's death, his friend John Webster wrote his play The Duchess of Malfi, incorporating a scene in which the Duchess' brother Ferdinand imagines that he is turning into a wolf, a pestilent disease they call lycanthropia. What is that? Cries one of the cast. I need a dictionary to it. Right? 이런 말들이 여기서 왜 나오는지 I need a dictionary to it because they need to find the meaning of it. 이런 것들이 이제 뭘 상징하는지 물어보는 거예요. 그러면 but in fact someone, a Rutland schoolmaster named Robert Cowdrey, who later moved to teach in Coventry, had evidently been listening to this drumbeat of demand, right? What is the meaning of this drumbeat of demand? A lot of people wanting it, right? He read and took copious notes from all the reference books of the day and eventually produced his first half-hearted attempt at what was wanted by publishing such a list in 1604. It was a small october book of 120 pages, which Cowdrey titled A Table Alphabetical of Hard, Unusual English Words. It had about 500 word entries. It had many shortcomings, but it was without doubt the very first true monolingual English dictionary. And its publication remains a pivotal moment in the history of English lexicography, right? So this is basically what? Talking about the advancement of a dictionary, why people needed a dictionary, in what certain instances or circumstances.